My name is Rick Jones. I am a partner at BioAdvance. BioAdvance is an early stage that is a seed Series A biotechnology venture capital fund located here in Philadelphia. We're focused on the Mid-Atlantic corridor, basically between New York City and Washington, D.C., along the I-95 corridor. We're a little bit different from most funds in that we're an evergreen, i.e. we recycle our proceeds and to make new investments rather than raising new funds every few years. My past history is I started as a practicing general internal medicine physician, did that for about 12 years before jumping into industry. And I followed a path from big pharma, medical affairs, then business development, into biotech business development, and more executive management, and then finally into, for about the last 8 years or so, investing. So I've sat on all sides of the table at this point, including being a patient at one point or another along the way. So it gives me an interesting perspective on some of these issues. Certainly been through a number of different exit scenarios along the way. I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves and then we can get on with the discussion. So Mike, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Rick. Again, my name is Mike Marcus, and I appreciate BioStrategy Partners sponsoring this event and happy to be here. So I'm currently the VP and General Manager of Vaportherm Access, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Vaportherm. Vaportherm is a medical device company that provides a medical device to help patients that are in general respiratory distress in hospitals. And now that technology is being moved into the home. Vaportherm Access is a digital health company. It's formerly HGE Health. It's a Temple University spin-out company that came out in 2012. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But my background, I'm a social psychologist by training. I was an academic. I left academics to start my first company called Within3, which was a search technology for medical scientists and physicians. I did that for 4 years. That was my first exit. After that, I started a small angel investment group in Philadelphia. We partnered with Temple Technology Transfer, and my passion, along with my partner Heather, was to look for academics that were working on novel technology at the very earliest stage. We would partner with them and help make seed investments and grow that. And that was one of the companies was HGE Health, based on the work of Jerry Kreiner, who's chief of pulmonology at Temple. And we grew that for a few years, and then Vaportherm acquired us back in November. So again, just like Rick, have different perspectives, both being a former academic, starting a company, and going through various rounds of funding and then exits. Happy to be here.
Great. Wendy?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to BioStrategy Partners for inviting me to participate today. Very excited to share my insights into what I think is such an exciting area to be in kind of my entire career. So I started my career as a public accountant with Deloitte & Touche, and then entered into essentially life sciences, medical device, and biotech as an executive public company CFO, where I've spent the last 25 years of my career as either a CFO, COO, president, and eventually board member for both public and private companies, and almost entirely in this startup phase, moving through to some sort of exit, whether it be sale, through all sale or IPO, and through all phases of financing, Series A, Series D, and public company raises, whether it be their IPO or follow-on offerings. I've bought companies, sold companies, and now serve primarily as an advisor to companies that are doing exactly this. And I serve in both a financial capacity or as an advisor just to boards through either Danforth Advisors, where I am a consultant, or through my own firm, Board Advantage. And it's been an incredibly rewarding career to really plug into companies in various phases and walk them through path to success. And as we'll discuss today, not always. There are times when that vision just isn't clear, and that path just can't be found. And so it's equally challenging to figure out exactly, how to, I'll say, walk away, or how to wrap it up when that path to success isn't clear. So I look forward to today's discussion.
Great. So we're going to take as a given that the intended audience here is the sort of academic entrepreneur who's thinking about or has already perhaps started their own company. I realize that it's a mixed audience, but I guess we had to come to some sort of assessment about how we might guide the discussion. If there are any questions or comments, I'd welcome you to send those along, and we'll try and address them and direct our discussion accordingly. But thinking about that audience, one of the key issues that we discussed in our preparation talk was sort of how do you put exits into the right context. Obviously, exits are a major thing that every entrepreneur has to address in their plan, but it's clear that a financial exit is not the same thing as the end of a business plan. That it is sort of one piece of a business plan, but how does that financial strategy and exit planning fit in the overall strategy of a business plan? So we thought it might be useful to sort of talk about different ways that exits play into the overall course of a business evolving, and how they can happen at different stages of the business and so on. So maybe Wendy, do you want to comment on what stages you've seen different businesses exit, and sort of what the impact on the overall business itself has been? It's not necessarily the end all and be all of that business, right?
Sure. I think one thing that's super important, especially for those of you who are in the early stages, forming a business and thinking about the business plan, is, the exit strategy should never be the beginning of your business plan. I think something that's super important as you form a team and kind of rally that team around the business plan is the items that are of the utmost important is, what is our vision? What is our mission? What are our short-term and long-term goals to accomplish that vision and mission? The exit will come as a result of successfully executing against all of those items. But that, vision, mission should never be, I hope I'm going to be a millionaire because I have a successful exit, right? Those things will come, but the most important thing is, how good is my asset? How do I solidify the strength of that asset? What is my, I'm in life sciences, so what is my in vitro, in vivo, animal study plan, clinical study plan? How do I prove that this asset is as good as I think it is? And how does my team rally around that? And once we do, build it and they will come, right? That everybody will understand that, and the exit strategy develops. And once you're there and you finally have people kind of knocking, saying, hey, we've seen what you've proved. We've seen proof of concept. We see people getting very excited about what you have. And sometimes that takes some marketing, right? People aren't just going to know that you're doing great things. So a marketing plan is part of that strategy. Then you start to develop, okay, so how do we raise additional funds? Do we raise more funds, or do we start thinking about exit? Is it the right time to think about a complete sale of the company, because this could be a lot more interesting in someone else's hands? Or is a public strategy really interesting at this time? This year has been an amazing time for companies to hit the public markets, because it's been an incredibly hot time to do that, and valuations have been amazing. At the same time, private financing has been very lucrative this year as well. So again, I think my real message is don't build a business plan around your exit strategy. Your exit strategy will come as a result of an incredibly successful business plan.
And Mike, I think it's interesting when you describe your current position. You're obviously running a business that basically is post-exit. So the business itself hasn't gone away. If anything, hopefully it's thriving and it's with its new financial partners. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the relationship between an exit and, you know, what happens to the project, what happens to the people, what happens to the business itself? I think you're muted.
We can't hear you, unfortunately, Mike.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, I had to call in on my phone, so that's me. So as a kind of a lead up to answering the question, Rick, I'll kind of reiterate and reinforce Wendy's point of view, which I think is an excellent one. I think when you first start a business or you're considering to start a business in advancing technology, each individual, that first person has to be wildly passionate about the idea. And that person, in effect, whether it's the inventor or their business partner, but whoever the originator or founder is, they're not really the chief executive officer, they're really the chief believer, right? So, and then that person has to kind of separate the world as either there are believers and non-believers. And ultimately, the passion drives innovation and the creation of that technology. And over time, it's that your job as chief believer to convince others and get them on your team or have them become investors. And as you develop that over time, there's a broader audience that become believers. And as you broaden that audience, then eventually, as Wendy said, exit opportunities will emerge. As we developed our business at HGE that was eventually bought by Vaportherm, that in effect was what took place. As we developed our business, we developed a relationship with another company. Vaportherm had a technology that was very complementary to us. We thought it provided great synergy in terms of what our mission and vision was, is to help patients that have respiratory issues inside the hospital and home and how to provide better care. We chose investors that kind of followed that vision and then looked for partners along the way. So once we were acquired by Vaportherm, it was an exit. It provided a financial return for our investors and for the participants who helped grow the business. But we were lucky enough to now operate as a wholly owned subsidiary. So it's essentially, we're doing the same thing we did before, except now we have more resources and more opportunity to kind of grow the business. So it's, we just look at it as we made them a believer, and now we continue on that journey. So.
Yeah. And I guess that's, you get to the point that I want to make sure that we covered during this part of the discussion, which is that an exit is, really a financial milestone that you've achieved. It's certainly important to the investors prior to that exit. They get a return on their investment. It's not necessarily obviously not necessarily the goal of the entire business. And businesses have lots of milestones. You might, if you're in biotechnology, you might have regulatory milestones. You might have development milestones. If you're a device company, you might have engineering milestones. There are obviously commercial milestones. One milestone in your financing strategy is to get to an exit to reward the investors who've been your partners up to that point. But the business itself, is something over and above just a pure vehicle to an exit. So we see as investors, a lot of companies come to us who basically say, I'm only going to have to raise X amount of dollars because at the end of phase 2, I'm going to sell the company, and that's that. Well, you can't always be sure that you're going to be able to have that kind of an exit. So our advice is always you should be building a company that can justify continued investment, continued development, and keep your financing opportunities or options open. If there's an exit along the way, it actually might come, the financial exit might come sooner than you expect. It might come later, but as long as you have a strong business plan, like Wendy was saying, you have a chance to continue the growth of that company. I think, Mike, obviously, that's what happened in your case. So, well, if we think then of this as a financial milestone and not sort of the end all and be all of the business per se, then we have to think about sort of how that matters to there are different types of investors, and some of them may have different ideas about when that milestone has to be hit or what that milestone should be. And if I just think about, obviously they're the public investors after an IPO, there are VCs, there are family offices. Maybe Mike, do you want to talk about the types of investors that you've interacted with and sort of what how their goals might differ, and sort of how you have to make sure that you're accommodating them in your plans?
Sure. So going back to my theme of believers and non-believers, when you're the only believer, the closest person you can try to convince to kind of fund the early stage idea is your family. So for many companies that start off, the earliest investors are friends and family. So those who necessarily, to Wendy's point, think you have the best business plan, but they trust that the person they care about has a good idea that they think is viable. And so in many cases, so that's for a lot of folks in my area, particularly in software, that's sometimes the earliest investor. Depending on where you're trying to develop the technology, the second set of investor are accredited investors, angel investors, and they range anywhere from people who can, who based on their financial profile, makes a certain amount of investments, 250 to 500,000. Investments where they do have diligence items that they check off. So they're the bridge essentially between friends and family and investors that institutional investors. So venture capitalists who go as Rick said, Series A investors who typically come in after angel investors and to make the first institutional investment in a company that then reach certain milestones. And Rick can talk a little bit about. So for us, we took a little bit of a different path. We did angel investors, family and friends, but because we came from an academic institution, we had strong relationships with industry. So we took a path in which we looked for strategic investors. Those strategic investors essentially funded our technology and in many cases was non-dilutive, meaning that they were interested in reaching milestones without taking equity in the company. So that's another class of investors that sometimes are challenging to work with and sometimes easier. So there's a trade-off between institutional investors and strategic investors, but those are another class that are, I think, particularly from an academic perspective, are often give the founders and give other investors the opportunity to get the best return. So we took that route where we took in several rounds of capital to help us do clinical trials to test the technology in various locations, and then that led to our strategic exit. So where we are acquired by one of our industry partners. So those are different flavors.
Yeah. So it's interesting. The different players, I'm sure, have different exit ideas. Hopefully, friends and family aren't holding you to a big exit, although they'd love to see it. Granting agencies don't need an exit at all, essentially, but the angels and other types of investors certainly do. Wendy, can you maybe give us some examples of, especially sort of mismatches between the types of investors that have been involved, and the way the business plan has gone and how that might affect the course of the business. Obviously, we all hope that there's going to be a great match, and you're doing the financial plan doesn't get in the way, but sometimes for one reason or another, you end up with a mismatch, and it'd be instructive maybe to hear about some of those.
Yeah, and I think, and Mike, you told a great story. I think that's the way a lot of companies start, is you do bring in people closest to you, oldest friends, family members. They often are the ones who believe in you the most at the beginning and are the first ones who will support you when you're trying to start a company of your own. And they're the ones who will probably stick around the longest as you're trying to accomplish your mission with a company. When it's time to go beyond that, and you need, if you haven't had, it sounds like you had a very nice exit and were able to find a company in the industry that thought the company was fantastic and was able to or wanted to acquire. To the extent you're at a place where friends and family or closest friends aren't able to write that big check for the next level of development, and it's time to go out to the investment community, I think one of my comments would be how important it is, if you're at that phase, typically you really need that next round of funding. And it's not easy to raise that round of funding. Let's say it's your first, it could be anything. It could be $1.5 million, it could be 2, it could be 5, it could be 15 million, but it's typically a pretty high bar to get to that first outsider round of funding. And I think companies often feel, executives, CEOs, founders, whoever may be doing that round, that as soon as someone says, I'm willing to write the check, you've won. But it's so important for you to really think about the match between you and that investor, whether it's one or several. And hopefully you do have a choice so that you can kind of decide, is this the right fit for me, my management team, the company that I'm growing? And you're not in a place where you just have to accept the first money that comes along, because that's really important as you grow and over the first few years, that to the question you asked, Rick, that you really do have a good fit between that investor and the company, the management team, the board that you will now form, that investor will sit on, and the meetings that will now transpire between those people over the first few years of the company, the conversations that will happen, the transparency that's expected between you, the management team, and that investor and the board. And if right from the beginning you don't feel that they're on the same page, that you all want the same thing, and that you don't have, you have to go into it with the expectation that you really are going to share everything about the business that you're building, creating with that investor and board. There can't be any secrets between this management team and that new investor. Of course, there's skinny down board presentations, and you're the management team and you're running the business, so that they don't know everything, but they have to know, progress and where the major investments are being made. And to any extent where you believe that you can omit significant details because the relationship isn't great, or that's the big thing, because the relationship isn't great, feel that out in the beginning, because it's absolutely critical to the long-term success between you, the founder, the CEO, the management team, and that investor that you're bringing in, or those investors that you're bringing in. It will absolutely, I believe, be a critical factor in long-term success. And I've seen it where it was actually a hindrance to that future success, and can often lead to, either breakup, CEO, founder kind of leaving the company, perhaps always not by choice. So feel it out carefully and make sure there's a great match between you and the investors you bring on board.
Yeah.
I hope I've answered the question, Rick.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so obviously you want to agree on the types of milestones that the financial investors feel are important and that fit into what you think is the right thing to do for your particular technology, with an eye towards increasing the value both of the technology in a sort of scientific and practical sense, but also of the technology in a financial sense. That's you improve it to the point where there'll be other investors who are willing to put in money at a higher valuation. That's the sort of win-win, and it has to happen in a time frame that your investors is important to your investors. Remember, venture capitalists, most of them, not BioAdvance, but most of them raise their money in 10-year funds, and if you haven't been able to deliver something when their fund is getting to the end of its lifetime, they might force you into certain options just so that they can get the return they need to close that fund down and move on. So having those milestones agreed upon and having your financial partners that and the ones that fit is really important. So, I mean, another thing in terms of valuation is it's always good to have options, right? And if you're saying if your only idea is you want to get to an IPO, well, you know, you can read about the number of IPOs in a year. It's not there's a finite number. The same, there's a finite number for mergers and acquisitions. Building a good business plan that'll let you have options, I think, is important. Mike, can you talk a little bit about how you thought about optionality in putting together your financial strategy?
Yeah, I think I think we should probably talk a little bit about, the cap table. So if we're going to talk about exit strategies, we should probably talk about cap tables.
Yeah.
Right. Ownership table. So so people are familiar with this concept. You start a company, and if you're the only founder, you can start it. Spend $50, and you've got yourself a company, and you own 100% of it. But you need money. You've got your own money. You could fund that company and reach certain milestones, and then you can, as the single owner of the company, make any decision that you want. Right? So if you want to sell the company for somebody comes along and wants to buy it for $1 billion, you could sell it. That's it. But that's not typically the way it works. I think it's important to, when we think about exit strategies, preparing for an exit and reinforcing this idea of who your partners are going to be from the financial side. As you grow your business, you'll exchange capital for ownership in most cases, right? And the more people that you bring into your cap table, the more complex your exit strategy becomes in some cases. And so depending, and again, I'd be interested in Wendy and Rick's perspective on this. That's a fundamental driver of an exit strategy, because the more people that are on your cap table, the expectations in terms of the returns that they're looking for, the percent ownership, who controls the company, what individuals control the company, is a huge driver in terms of how. So thinking about that early on is the best possible way to think about your exit strategy. So I would be, am I off base on that, Rick and Wendy, or?
No, not at all. It's critical, obviously. And Wendy, I know we recently worked on a deal that the company actually had been on a path to raise a Series B, but then all of a sudden another option came up to basically go public via SPAC. Again, based on the cap table and who was sitting at the table, there was a very interesting discussion about which direction to take. So I don't know if you want to talk about, again, sort of options and how you work through those.
Yeah, I think, Mike, your point is an excellent one. And maybe, the most important part of it is, and not always controllable, is, who on that cap table has the strongest arm, or maybe better said, the highest stake, right? And to Rick's point on the transaction that we were working on, and in any case, no matter what transaction it is, um, the interesting part as the management team is, in many cases, sometimes even if you are the founder, after you've taken on investment rounds, you don't always have that highest ownership percentage, right? So you've been grinding it out for many, many years, and maybe even it was your technology in the beginning, but now you've brought on investors who have, I'll make something up, right? 20% stake, 25% stake, 20% stake, and here you are now with 7.5, maybe 5% stake. And you firmly believe this is the best direction for the company. But you've really got to figure out how to make that presentation to this investment group and win them over. But it's their money, right? And they've got to believe that. And in my opinion, particularly in this case, that can be hugely dependent on the team that you surround yourself with and the qualifications of that team. So amazing professional advisors, corporate counsel who's been in these trenches before, and or tranches, and know how to really present both sides of the argument. So here's why this might be, here's why we should do this SPAC, or here's why we may want to continue pursuing a Series B. Here's why the public markets might be right for this company. Here's why we might want to stay private. And Rick, in our case, I thought that our corporate counsel did an amazing job on the sidelines, things that most everyone didn't see, on one-on-ones with each one of those investors who had pretty strong opinions in some pretty specific directions, and the transaction could have gone either way. And really acting as an ally. So for everyone on the call, the company management really wanted to go forward with the SPAC. And there were some people in the cap table who said, I don't think it's the right time. I'm really not sure we want to do that. And who knows, who knows who was right? The bottom line is we went forward with the SPAC. We felt very confident that we could do it. We've recruited an amazing management team at this time. It was a company of two at the time the company was approached. And so I would say, again, surround yourself, if that is your situation, in any situation, with amazing professional advisors, and think really carefully about that. And maybe another point is, even if you've had professional advisors who have been with you from the beginning, sometimes it's really good to evaluate that at really critical junctures of a company. So let's say you've had a small local legal firm from the time you started, and they were they've been loyal, they've supported you well. When you're ready to do a really large transaction or a transformative transaction for the company, they're not always the best legal counsel to have with you at that time. And they may not be the one to serve you best at those critical junctures of a company. And so those are the things I would really think about long and hard when you're faced with really transformative moments in a company's history. Who are my absolute best advisors? Because I think they can really make the difference in whether or not your particular transaction, a merger, an acquisition, an IPO, your Series B, are going to get done or not. Even an IR firm is going to help you pitch the company.
I want to jump in here a little bit. We got a question from the registration regarding SPAC, which is going public with a SPAC less desirable than going the regular way? And could you discuss that a little bit? Thank you.
Wendy, do you want to take that first?
Sure. So, if you had asked that question, and I'll certainly then, ask Rick and Mike to opine as well. If you'd asked that question 3 years ago, I think the general answer amongst anybody on the panel would have been, yeah, it's less desirable. It's kind of the quick, dirty. If you can't get public through the normal channels, you'll probably find a SPAC who could bring you public. And it really took a different turn during the course of the last 12 to 18 months. There are a lot of hugely reputable investment firms, companies in all industries, biotech, tech, industrials that are raising tremendous amounts of money. You've seen it. Everybody's seen it on the news to bring very reputable companies public via SPAC. And there can be tremendous advantages to doing it. It can be a shorter way to the IPO markets. It can have less dilution than going public via IPO without a crossover round. So it has come into favor a little bit, much more over the last 12 months than it had been over the 3 years ago. And I'll go ahead and let Rick or Mike speak.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
I'm going to let you comment, and then I'll just want to have one short comment on it.
Okay. Yeah, I would completely agree with Wendy on that assessment. Most recently, I don't think there's much negative connotation at all. I think the negative connotations, to the extent they existed, were because SPACs kind of resembled reverse mergers, and there was a time when reverse mergers were sort of seen as two undesirable entities kind of getting together to make maybe one less undesirable entity.
Yeah.
But the SPACs, which are really a different animal, I think don't carry that. And you've seen lots of very, very good companies go public via SPACs. So, Mike, was there something else?
Sure. So I look at it. I look at the world from the perspective of, I wear my hat as chief believer in a technology, and just figuring out how to move that technology to benefit as many people as possible, right? So our goal for this technology that came out of Temple is we want to help patients that have complex chronic lung disease all around the world, right? So exits, from my perspective, are just mechanisms by which to advance the technology to benefit people. And if we're lucky enough, we continue on the journey with that, right? So when we chose to be acquired by Vaportherm, the other side of the discussion was, of all the investors that we brought along the way, it's the, hey, there's a time for a financial return, right? And those are real conversations, because every conversation that I've always had with every investor that's participated with us has always been the same, which is, we believe that this technology will benefit a lot of people. If we're successful, we believe there'll be a strong financial return. The chances of success are almost zero, but as the chief believer, we think we're going to do it. I wish, regarding the SPAC, I now wish we actually had an opportunity, because to Wendy's point, it became more of a mainstream mechanism, recently, and we didn't have an opportunity to explore it. But looking back on it now, it could have been a mechanism for us, worth exploring to see whether or not we could further advance the technology faster through that mechanism. So I think it's a great, viable mechanism. It really just depends, if you're looking through the lens of the two questions: will it advance the technology? Is this going to provide the best return for our investors? And you make that decision. So, you always have that fiduciary responsibility when you embark on this journey.
Yeah. And I look at it as one more sort of option on the table, and it's always good to have options. I mean, in my personal experience, I was at a company where we were at the same time sort of looking at raising a Series C, talking to companies about licensing to get non-dilutive, licensing revenue in to fund the rest of our pipeline, and also talking to companies about M&A. And all the time. We had a business plan to push things, push our pipeline forward and so on. These were different sort of ways to finance the company, and in some cases get exits. We ended up going to an M&A, but we had got a much better financial outcome of that because we had options. And so really thinking about optionality, not just pointing towards I've got to have an IPO, or I've got to sell out to some strategic partner, or I've got to raise a Series B or whatever. Having that optionality and thinking about that, I think is really key. But maybe in the last 15 minutes or so, we could talk about kind of putting yourself in a position so that when these options make themselves available, or when you generate the options through your hard work and so on, you know, what do you need to have in place to take advantage of those options? So Mike, maybe you could start out by talking about sort of what you would recommend people do so that they can take advantage of an exit opportunity.
I think, Wendy, you're probably better at this than I am, but I'll take a run at it. So I wish having great advisors, to Wendy's point, is probably the best place to start. If you're a first-time entrepreneur and you don't have advisors, you're learning everything on the fly, right? So read as much as you can, but advisors are great. If you're lucky enough to have done it once, maybe you're successful, maybe you weren't, you repeat and you're successful. But I think to prepare, the best is, one, don't start if you're not passionate about what the journey, number one. Number two, to Wendy's point, great advisors. Those advisors will tell you to make sure that you document and have good controls over all transactions of the company, so that and every contract that you enter into, every employment agreement, every round of capital is well documented, and try to do so in a way that there's a great deal of control around that, meaning, you know, it's in a data room, it's organized, and it's prepared for review for your internal stakeholders, but ultimately future investors, and then hopefully, as Rick said, you know, there's multiple options for exit, and when those options occur, they're going to want to review those materials, and the better organized they are, the faster a transaction can happen with less hiccups along the road.
Okay. Wendy?
Yeah, Mike, I agree. Yeah, agree with everything you said, Mike. It's really about everything, all the points you made. It's organization before the time actually comes, so that when it does, and if the opportunity presents itself, your answer is cool, calm, and collected. No problem. I'm ready. Data room, or to anyone on the call, really what that means is have some repository where all the contracts, payroll records, NDAs, CDAs, that's really important as a young company. Well, you know, you may not be thinking about it. Protect yourself with confidentiality agreements early on and save copies of them. All these things need to be saved somewhere in a shared spot, so that when a transaction comes along and someone says to you, you know, we need your last 5 years worth of data, you don't literally want to jump off a cliff, but you say, oh, no problem. I've been saving those in a central location, and I've been asking the other 3 people who work with me to do the same. So we've kind of got a head start on that. It's really not a big deal versus, you know, looking for the closest bucket because you can't even stomach the thought of trying to figure out where all those things might be. You know, for me, something like Microsoft SharePoint, where you probably already are using Microsoft. It's a really inexpensive license to install for each of the company users, and it's a really easy place for everyone to share their common documents and then access them, especially now that most people, or many people, are working remote. You know, very, very, very easy and inexpensive thing to invest in. It is, in my opinion, something better and more secure than something like Dropbox, which has size limitations. Anyway, saving those documents, and then from a financial perspective, the sooner you have someone who knows how to really account for the various things that you're doing, and even if that means it's not on a monthly basis or every day when you're doing them, but just at the end of a year to come in and really take a look at what it is you did. Things to people who aren't finance people may seem kind of ordinary, but when someone comes in and looks at it, they may say, in fact, there's actually some complexities around the transactions that you did, and we need to make these modifications to the way you've accounted for them. Strongly recommend an audit, even in your early years, from a small local accounting firm. It's a reasonably inexpensive investment. If you're getting close to a transaction, I strongly recommend moving into the larger firms. There's regional firms, Grant Thornton BDO, Baker Tilly, and then of course there's the big four, which if you're heading towards IPO, everyone certainly seems to think that's the way you need to go. Personally, the more cooperative and knowledgeable your audit firm is as you head into a large transaction like an IPO, or in my case, this SPAC we just went through. There's a huge issue this year with the warrants that are included in SPAC transactions, and having that asset in an audit firm that kind of has been through it, can understand it, can help you get through the technicalities with the SEC. Again, just like I said with legal counsel, it's really an amazing asset to have. So again, the better your counsel professionals are, you're better off that you are. So like Mike said, it's about preparation and just kind of thinking about those things at a time when it's really not something you feel like you need to be worried about. So from the beginning, just put your ducks in a row.
And if I can just add a little bit to what Wendy was saying too. I think it's always fun to get to the little bit on the ugly side, right? It's not all sunshine and roses when you're running a business. And so there's, depending on how much, your business plan, how much money you have to raise, there's the trade-off with the ownership. When you bring in investors, how much do they take? There's also a trade-off when you're raising money about how the use of those proceeds and how you're setting up your company. So to Wendy's point, ideally, you're finding really great accounting and legal lawyers working with the company. Sometimes the better the firms, help with transactions in the future based on, who's doing that work. So there's always that trade-off you're thinking about along the way. I also think there's the issues of like documentation along the way. There's going to be bumps in the road. Maybe there's a lawsuit, frivolous lawsuit. How do you document that? How do you process it? How do you make sure that it doesn't get in the way from a future exit perspective? So those are, having good legal counsel, having good accountants is going to help you in any of those bumps along the way. So I would add that.
Right. So Brian, is there any more comments, or should we wrap up here?
Yep, I think Ben Goldberg submitted a couple questions, so I want to get to those for sure. The first one is, so investors really want to know your exit strategies and be sure your goals are aligned with theirs. So isn't starting a company without an exit strategy like starting a trip without a map? How do you know what milestone you need to hit to attract investors, potential acquirers in the public market?
Rick, if I could, if this is referring to the comment that I made, which was around, you don't start a company around an exit strategy. But Ben mentions two things here. What milestones do you hit? Milestones are a very important part of a business plan. So, what asset do I have? What assets do I need to advance this asset, as in people, resources, cash? And to the point Rick made, which is, and what time frame do I need to accomplish my vision and my mission? So I believe I need, the first 9 months to accomplish something in an animal study, another 18 to get through maybe a phase 1 in a human. That's kind of short, but and then I think I'll be able to show proof of concept. So maybe it's 24 until I can show that I believe my product actually works in a human being. So you have to define milestones, but milestones are different than exit, right? So that's really what the differentiation I was making is. Absolutely, your business plan has to be very clear about at what time frames you believe you'll be able to demonstrate success points of the asset that you have. And even if, I'm talking again very specific to life sciences, but if you've got a different type of asset, a technology asset, at what point a consumer might actually believe that it's something they might want, or when you might hit a revenue milestone of something. You have to have milestones that show you believe there's success to the product you have, but that is not necessarily the same as, and so I believe I could therefore raise or sell the company. The investor who's looking at your plan then makes those decisions. Okay, I think if you can prove that if you've got proof of concept, you could probably do a Series A. If you've got if you actually have started a human clinical, you could then possibly, do an IPO. Or if you've got first patient in, or first data, they're the ones who are going to make those decisions. The investor on where your strategy, your exit points might be, and at what valuation. And that was really my point. You don't enter into it with the exit strategy. You enter into it with the business plan, and the business plan determines the exit. That was really my point.
Yeah.
And I don't know how Rick and Mike feel about that.
Mike, do you want to add anything?
I think, and maybe my response doesn't answer the question, but when I think of milestones and exits, you're a chief believer, you're overly optimistic, set your milestones that are achievable with the least amount of capital to come in exchange for equity in the company. If you over deliver on the milestones from a timeline perspective, the higher the probability you get better, higher confidence from an investor base, as well as potential exit. That would be my comment.
Yeah, and I think there are some obviously, upper limits, upper boundaries. If you're going to raise venture capital, then there has to be some believable story that they can see some sort of return within the lifetime of their fund, or it just doesn't fit in their model, and you shouldn't be raising venture capital. But you also shouldn't be raising capital sort of with unrealistic expectations that you can get to an exit. A very common scenario we see is people want to raise capital, get to an IND, but our belief is that the next valuation milestone isn't until they have phase 2 data. So, you basically raise capital, but you're left dangling with the question, can I then raise more to get to phase 2 where it's actually worth something? So matching those milestones with the sort of financial, the financing options that you have, I think is the critical step.
One other interesting point, Rick, and we have a minute here. One comment that I'd like to make that, I don't know, I learned this from a few investor relations firms presentations I've seen, is maybe a pitfall for an early a founder of a company is that
we lost your audio there, Wendy. Not sure what happened there, Wendy, but we lost the audio.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay.
I guess we have 2 minutes left. Could we briefly, maybe like 1 minute, discuss the difference between, so Ben has a question, which is, with a SPAC, the company knows exactly the terms they negotiated, but with an IPO, the number of shares offered and offering price can change at the last minute, depending on the market. Do you agree or not?
I agree, but I don't think we should spend a lot of time talking about the details of going public. But yes, that is correct.
Okay. Okay, I think we still don't have Wendy with us. Oh, I hear something.
All right. Well, we're at the end of our time.
Well,
here,
yeah.
so,
Yeah, we have 1 minute left. I just want to thank everybody for joining in on this discussion today. I thought it was very, very well moderated, and that's with all the discussion, that was very nice to hear. And I want to thank the panelists again, and Rick especially with the moderating the panel. And I want to thank the sponsors again for hosting this panel discussion today. So thanks everybody for joining in today.
All right. Thank you.